You're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, as a backgrounder to our conversation this morning, which is on fulfilling the dreams of independence, we listened to this background report put together by our correspondent, Abdulsalam Jibril.
It is countdown to Nigeria's 62nd Independence Day celebrations, and the impending festivities is already being felt across the country. Going down memory lane by the late 1950s, when the winds of independence from colonial rule was blowing across Africa, the decline of the British Empire and the push by some eminent Nigerians led to the country being granted independence on 1st October 1960. It was a fun-filled celebration as Nigerians trooped out en masse. From fireworks to dance troops, masquerade display, even a state banquet where dignitaries mingled and danced was held. The celebration was climaxed with a grand ceremony hosted by the Prime Minister, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. At the time, Nnamdi Azikiwe was Governor General. Princess Alexandra represented the late Queen Elizabeth II, who was still the country's sovereign. Some historians maintain that the prospects of the new country appeared promising and expectations for the future were very high. This was boosted largely by the discovery of commercial quantities of petroleum in the Niger Delta region. They maintain that Nigeria was dubbed the giant of Africa and a beacon of hope and progress for other colonized peoples emerging from the yoke of colonization. Like other countries, Nigeria has had to contend with her own fair share of challenges over the years, including a civil war, insecurity, prolonged military rule, ethno-religious conflicts, corruption, and dwindling economic fortunes, among others. However, since the return to democratic rule in 1999, the country has been recording great strides. Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa and sixth largest in the world. She also possesses one of the largest populations of youths in the world. She has the largest economy in Africa and the 31st largest in the world by nominal gross domestic product. Nigeria's movie industry, Nollywood, is Africa's largest movie industry in terms of both value and the number of movies produced per year. How has Nigeria fared in its almost 62 years of independence from British colonial rule? Has the dreams of the founding fathers been realized or still work in progress? These and more will form the crux of discussions as guests speak to fulfilling the dreams of independence at 62 in a moment.
All right, thank you very much, Abdulsalam Jibril, for that backgrounder. And of course, you saw the green, white, green flag fluttering in the wind there in celebration of Nigeria's independence at 62. We have two guests with us in the studios, and another guest joining us from one of our network centers. Let's welcome the chairman of the Senate Committee on Media and Public Affairs, Senator Suraj Judin Ajibola Basiru. Distinguished Senator, we're glad to have you this morning.
Yeah, good morning.
All right. Also here with us in the studios is the former secretary to the Adamawa State Government, Dr. Umar Bindri. Umar Bindri, of course, is an engineer and is currently national coordinator of the National Social Investment Program, NSIP, in the office of the Honorable Minister of Humanitarian Affairs. Dr. Bindri, we're glad to have you this morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigeria.
And also joining us from Benin is Professor Osareme Benson Osadolo, Department of History and International Studies, University of Benin, and immediate past acting Vice Chancellor of Ambrose Ali University, Epoma, Edo State. You're welcome to Good Morning, Nigeria, sir.
Good morning, Nigeria. All right, gentlemen, of course, this is the first in our series on Nigeria at 62. And I'm sure some of our viewers will just be wondering, why do you have an all-male cast of
no
guests?
female.
Yeah, but you are here, of course, so you can you can weigh in. We will have a number of conversations around relevant themes of our independence anniversary. And as I said, this is the first of such installments that we'll be having. Gentlemen, let's begin the conversation this way. Even from the word independence, it connotes freedom. It connotes hope. It connotes aspiration. It connotes the fact that, look, you are free to live your dream. 62 years down the road, are we fulfilling our dreams of independence? Omar Bindri.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kingsley. And well, just like you said, independence, 62 years. At the time when we got independent from the colonial masters, I think it's a very, very clear indication that we are ready, we are matured, we're free, we can be able to strategize. We believe that we can generate, or we have the capacity to do everything we wanted to do, with the hope to grow and demonstrate to the world that we are actually good people, we are actually living together, and so on and so forth. But it's now 62 years. So it's now up to us to gauge 62 years of the impacts of those hopes, of those aspirations. In my opinion, having run around the whole world, seeing what has happened in other countries, seeing the evolution of ways and means of life, I want to answer this question with optimism. Optimism in the sense that I think we've gone a long way in trying to achieve these objectives. Many Nigerians may not agree with me, but my own scientific and technical observation is that we are not very good at celebrating success. I think we've had so many good things, but instead for us to take it and celebrate it and excite the world on what we have achieved, we sometimes downplay it and shortchange ourselves. If I may cite one or two examples, very, very simplistic examples, is that, look, Abuja itself is a new capital city. Many countries tried to do this. Australia tried to do this with Canberra. The UK tried to do this with Milton Keynes. They still haven't achieved it. We did. We set a fresh capital. We triggered it. We are running it. But we actually don't remember. We just don't celebrate it. We even complain of having Abuja and so on and so forth. Secondly, if I go down to a very micro thing, we launched a communication satellite as probably one of the first African countries to delve into very, very high technology. We had Earth observation satellites in orbit. We can see everything. We can see the number plate of a car using Nigerian satellite. We had communication satellite that we can power up our television, radios, telephony, and everything. But I can tell you, many Nigerians did not even know that we have achieved this. In fact, after putting these satellites in orbit, we started fighting who will control it. So again, celebrating successes is an issue for us. But I think we have had a long string of so many good things, and we need to, even the Civil War. There are very few countries that have actually fought a civil war and just decided to forget about it. We did that. Instead of celebrating it, even the ones that were never born before the war, once war again, you know what I mean? So again, it's lack of celebrating. So the range of very good things that have happened in this country over the last 62 years are very, very long. But you need to be a historian, you need to be an optimist, and you need to calm down so that you can be able to gradually unleash the benefits, in my opinion.
Of course, Senator Sirajuddin, he's saying that we are not really celebrating ourselves. We are not being optimistic that at the fact that we are at 62. That's an adult age for any nation. What's your opinion?
I will slightly, differ a bit from Dr. Bindil. Yes, it's good to look at issues from an optimistic point of view, but from a perspective of trying to, build a nation and develop a paradigm for good, government, we need to be critical. We cannot just afford to try to glamorize certain aspects. We have to set our binoculars to look critically at what are the issues. First and foremost, on the issue of independence, I will say that what we had in 1960 was rather a political independence, not economic independence. And that is why scholars of globalization have been able to come up with the coinage of neocolonialism. Whereas you have, what is called flag independence, you have your green, white, green fluttering, as Kingsley said at the beginning of the program. But the reality is that the economy of our country, just like all other African countries, even the subtlety of our politics was still be controlled, from the motherland in Europe and America. So when you talk of 2 years of independence, in reality, you must be able to make a distinction between political independence and economic independence. As Africans, did we really achieve economic independence in the 60s and the 50s? And you could see a lot of intermeddling. Maybe to a large extent, they were not as overt as in some other countries. You have experience of our brother, Patrice Lumumba, who was arrested and murdered brutally by agents of imperialism. You have the story of the Council of Betrayal of Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana. You also have instances of deliberate pouring up of dictators by the colonial masters, even after independence, with a view, to be able to assess the resources of Africa. You could see that until the 70s with the indigenization policies of the military government that time, the commanding height and the real sector, even retail business, was still controlled by foreigners in our country. So when we talk about 62 years of independence, we must be able to make a distinction between political independence and economic independence. And also one of the belief the handover of colonialism for us was a country called Nigeria, which story started from amalgamation in 1914. One of the challenges, and which we must confront, and not just say we are celebrating 2 years, is to that extent have we been able to forge a nation out of the country bequeathed to us by the colonial enterprise. When in the run-up to 2023 elections, people still think in terms of where a presidential candidate comes from, what kind of religion does a presidential or presidential candidate profess, speaks to the need for us we need to really discover the Nigerianity, if I may use that word, of ourselves, even 62 years after independence. We need to be able to set paradigm that development and advancement of our people to be able to work tall in the community of nations. To what extent are we as Nigerians proud of our green passport when we get out of the shore of this country? It's not just about question of being pessimistic or criticizing ourselves or not seeing success. If we only see success, we're not able to challenge ourselves on what are the areas we need to plug. So we need to first and foremost plug the Nigerianity of the Nigerian nation, which was the dream at independence. To what extent are we able to forge to even address issue of insecurity? We try to look at it from the paradigm of ethnic perspective to address issue of governance. And when you look at it, all said and done, this inability to forge a Nigerian identity is affecting the mass of our people. Poverty does not discriminate for wherever you come from. Insecurity does not discriminate for wherever you come from. So the first and foremost task for us going forward after 2 years, or what I call flag or political independence, is how do we forge an identity of a Nigerian nation, and then see the task of developing real sector of our economy, and not tie our economy to the dictates of the international global dynamics, which of course is schemed against the colonized world like Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Senator Basiro. We'll come back to you. Let's go over now to our Benin Network Center. Professor Osadolo, is Nigeria living up its dream of independence 62 years later?
Thank you. Let us look at the essence of independence in 1960. It was basically the struggle for freedom and democracy, defined as self-determination. In which case, the nationalists that struggled for independence in 1960 had in mind four basic things. Number one, the freedom to decide on what to do concerning their own affairs, the authority to control their own affairs, to mobilize resources for their own development, and of course, finally, to see the extent in which they all can be involved or engaged in nation building. Since 1960 till today, we talk about fulfilling that dream. What has been the case in building the Nigerian state since 1960? Number one, nation building is a process. It evolves in phases. So leaders come and go, but they contribute basically to that process of building the nation. There are two categories of nation building. First, integration, and secondly, the issue of development. Let's take integration. Integration has to do with the unity of all Nigerian people. It has to do with a common consciousness that we are all Nigerians and therefore we are committed to building Nigeria. It's also connected to our national aspirations. What do we want our country, Nigeria, to be in relations to other countries of the world? Beyond this, how do we develop in the Nigerian citizens a sense of national character, a sense of national identity, a sense of national outlook, a sense of national aspiration that as Nigerians, this is what we plan to achieve as a major goal in the next years. Then the other aspect is development. This has to do with critical infrastructure. In the past 62 years, we've had governments. The First Republic collapsed after 5 years. Military regimes, coup and counter-coups. Second Republic, rise and fall. Third Republic, rise and fall. Today, we are in the Fourth Republic. Now, looking critically at the dreams of independence in the past 62 years, I would say that many Nigerians have the hope that this will be a great country that will rule the world. But we have been frustrated by deliberate hiccups. Hiccups arising from rivalries, from ethnicity, from religion. This is simply because we do not yet understand the definition of nation building. Nation building begins by practical self-rule. How do you govern yourself as a people and as a nation? What brings you together to say, okay, you are from this particular part of the country, and therefore this will be your contribution to national development? What exactly is it that you need in terms of structure to ensure that all the segments of society are put together? Don't forget, in 1960, when Nigeria attained independence, the federal system was not balanced. And this created crisis. From day one of independence until military coup, counter coup, and the outbreak of a civil war. It was on the eve of war that 12 states were created. 12 states were created from the existing 4 regions. All of this did not satisfy Nigerians as mobilizing themselves to build a nation. 19 states were created. 21 states were not created. 30 states were created. Today, we have 36 states. Now, looking at the practical aspect, does this creation of states fulfill the dreams and aspirations of Nigerians 62 years after independence? Certainly not. In 2014, at the National Conference in Abuja, there were a series of agitations for the creation of more states. What is wrong with the structure of the Nigerian state? A second aspect is the economy. Let us look at the Nigerian economy. Nigeria was described in 1960 as the giant of Africa. In other words, Nigeria has enormous resources in terms of national resources, natural resources, and human resources. But in the 1980s, what happened? The opportunity for economic growth was blown up, such that in the 90s, Nigeria was now described as a crippled giant. But I strongly believe, as a historian, that the crippled giant will walk again. But beyond all of this, we have been battling with how the economy of this country can be productive. Today, the Nigerian economy is more or less 70% a consumption economy and 30% a production economy. That in itself is a major burden on the politics of Nigeria. The economy cannot sustain Nigerian politics the way it is. 1/3 of the resources are spent on politics. Let's be very frank about that. In which case, what happens is that Nigeria is not able to dedicate its resources to critical infrastructure, hospitals, schools, roads, bridges, etc. What will make a Nigerian happy is because of access to health facilities, access to good education, access to good roads. We have no electricity. Some days ago, I was told, or we heard, that the national grid collapsed. How many times in a year will the grid be collapsing? We can't provide simple electricity. We can't provide water. I live in Benin. Virtually every household in Benin has borehole. The dangers are real in future. So government is not doing its best to mobilize its resources in fulfilling the dream of independence in 1960. However, like I said earlier, every regime has the opportunity to contribute its best at that time to nation building. When you leave, history will begin to judge you. We will look at your legacies and see what you have done and begin to concentrate on the next regime. It's important that Nigerians also understand that building the nation is not only in the hands of public-spirited leaders. We as Nigerians, we must be involved in nation building. We as Nigerians, we must be committed to nation building. We as Nigerians will ensure that Nigeria is a nation that God has given to us, whether through colonialism, whether through our own deliberate effort to remain as one, like I once said. To keep Nigeria one is a task that must be done. I strongly believe in that task of keeping Nigeria as one. But how do we mobilize Nigerians to believe in that nation-state project? Today, there are all kinds of agitations. Stop nationalist agitations, Niger Delta, Biafra, elsewhere, even among the Yorubas, all kinds of agitations. What has brought all of this about? Can't we sit down as a people, as a nation, and begin to reflect on our problems? Because we often miss politics with government in this country. We understand that politics is the struggle for power. And so people take politics and mix it up with government. Government has a function, has a duty to ensure that resources are mobilized for the good and benefit of every citizen. But today, politics has become a huge investment for some families, for some individuals, for some people, and for some groups. And therefore, they forget about the business of governance. That is why today, many Nigerians are saying, what kind of society are we living in? They talk about insecurity, nobody cares. Talk about even ordinary water to drink, nobody cares. Talk about electricity, we are in darkness in this country, nobody cares. Politicians, our rulers, our leaders must begin to reflect on the pains that the ordinary Nigerian is going through. Their hope of 1960, 62 years after, should be reflected in three things. Number one, the right to life. Number two, their liberty. And number three, the pursuit of happiness. How happy are Nigerians today? Let's be very frank to ourselves. If the pursuit of happiness is not the concern of the leader, we have no business being in government. If the protection of rights is not the concern of those in government, we have no business being there. If the protection of your liberty, the liberty of the ordinary Nigerian, is not the concern of you, the politician, you have no business being there. We must understand that all of us are stakeholders in the building of Nigeria as a great nation. This country, Nigeria, is a threat to the rest of the world. The largest economy in Africa, and of course, within the shortest possible time, Nigeria can overtake the United States and other economies of Europe. We need to come together and put our house in order. We need to come together and begin to reflect that God has blessed us with this country called Nigeria, and we must be committed to building the nation. Lest I forget, Nigerians don't talk about state building. That is, in other words, our capable political institutions. In Nigeria, when you talk of state building, it is directly related to nation building. How we are fed in the past 62 years. What kind of institutions exist in Nigeria? They are very weak. Individuals are more powerful than institutions in this country. Why? Simply because they don't just want those institutions to exercise the functions for which they were created. There are political institutions. There are different levels of government. There are different arms of government. How functional are they in terms of independence? How do we also understand our economic institutions? How do we regulate the economy of Nigeria? How do we encourage investment and manufacturing and production? Why do we have to depend on even China to produce toothpick for us as a people? Why do we have to depend on China to manufacture cloth for us as a people? Why do we have to depend on Taiwan to get electronics for us as a people? We have the resources, enormous, human, to actualize all of these dreams. And I strongly believe 62 years is just an experiment. We have done our best. Leaders have done our best. Their best in the past.
Yes, Professor Osadolo, yes, we still have some guests here in the studios who would like to come, but we'll come back to you in the course of the program. Let's come back to Engineer Bindel. You've listened to the two respondents in the studio and Benin, and it all boils down to Nigerians loving this country and making sure everything works in this country. I'm sure our founding fathers might not just be too happy with us. What do you think?
Well, you see, that is one of the things that normally reviews do. Fantastic review by the professor of history, and we have a very powerful politician here who have been listening on the quality and the content of political leadership. But for me, reviews of this nature can be taken on 4 platforms. What have we been able to do post-independence politically? I think we have demonstrated to the world that we have done a lot of experiments, we have done elections, we've gone to the military, and then back in 1999, we decided to settle down, despite all the experiences and the differences. And gradually, our democracy is sustaining itself, and in fact, it's so unthinkable now to start seeing the military coming back to take over. And I think that is part of the development process. Economically, we have, over the years, demonstrated that we can produce the richest entrepreneur in Africa, which is a good index as far as I'm concerned. And we have also, within that space of the 62 years, demonstrated to the world, even to be named as the strongest economy in the continent. But conversely, the same reviewers will now say Nigeria is the poverty capital of the world. Nigeria has the highest number of out-of-school children. So you see, everything is there, and we see prosperity, we can produce highest level of people, and then also at the same time, we have the lowest level of performance. Third, you look at morally, this is a country that is sort of like everything we do, religion will come into it, which is the key component for morality. But yet, the same thing we use to chop ourselves into pieces, to abuse ourselves, to say that leaders have to align to this. And we don't believe that we are morally together, despite the fact that there's only one God and everybody is looking at that. And then you have corruption coming into it, undermining all these things. At the fourth level is the technical level, efficiency level, deployment of techniques to make progress, as they say. Look, today, when you go to the internet and you review the American economy, you'll hear even the American president mentioning that Nigerian doctors are dominating the US, which is a functional economy. Nigerian engineers are dominating the system. You go to the UK, even politically, Nigerians are, now when you see Adebayo as member of parliament, there is no question that this is a Yoruba man and he's a Nigerian. There is no, so we have it. But then when it comes to our own country, you find that we have ASU issues. We are not producing fantastic critical mass of young people who are thinking entrepreneurially. So you see, all these put together, I can conclude on this argument on three things. First, Nigerians must understand 62 years. If the level of poverty still remains high, you cannot score yourselves high. We cannot score ourselves high. And we're not talking about relative poverty. We're talking about absolute poverty. Majority of Nigerians don't have clean water to drink. So they are open to waterborne diseases. It's not nice to see. Many children cannot have access to basic education. Terrible level of poverty. You cannot look at the future, and so on and so forth. At the second level, we must review our country to see that, do we actually have the skills, the competencies, and the capacities to manage this great country, to take advantage of the agricultural resources, to take advantage of our oil resources, to take advantage of our economic resources? I don't think we are going on that track very, very well. You cannot close your tertiary institution very well and expect this critical mass of highly technicalized people to evolve. And finally, at the lowest level, Nigeria must understand, like Professor said, unless we are evolving institutions that are standard, that can compete internationally, our political institutions, our security institutions, our economic institutions, our regulatory institutions, to compete to be at par at the highest level, we cannot sustain this development. So in this review, this is the package. You have it and you don't have it. You can do it, but you are not doing it. You are there, but you are not there. This is the package of review, and that's how I see it.
Dr. Umar Bendu, thank you very much. That is the cohabitation of progress and poverty. Cohabitation of, some would say, light and dark. And then cohabitation of hope and despair. Thanks a lot for your perspective. Senator Basiru, and of course, Professor Osadolo and Dr. Bindri. Anyone who is watching us right now and is half the age of Nigeria's independence, so I'm saying like you are 31 years, 32 years or younger, the temptation might be strong for the individual to assume that Nigeria was always like this. But we do know that Nigeria was not always like this. Professor Osadolo says, look, in Benin, as in most, if not all urban centers in Nigeria, every household has a borehole. But he would tell you, when he was growing up, he didn't know what a borehole was like, because you had a tap.
Yes.
You had a tap. You could turn on the tap. You could go to school. You could go to the general hospital, which is now specialist hospital, in Benin. And earlier, when we were reviewing the papers, because some of the issues, gentlemen, that you have raised, they are so touching, but because we are talking about a dream, we hope that young Nigerians would not assume that this dream has become a nightmare, because that dream functioned in the post-independence years, but then we lost our way. The question then would be, for us to find our way back to our dream, how and where did we lose our way? Professor Osadolo raises the question about the collective contribution of all to nation building. You said earlier, Senator Basiru, Nigerians will not be proud of their passports, XYZ. It wasn't always like that, you know. Up until 1986, you took a flight, Nigeria Airways, but from Murtala Mohammed Airport, and you landed at Heathrow or at Gatwick, they will give you your visa on arrival. How did we lose our way? Bashir.
Yeah, I think to start, the paradox of progress and also adversity, and of course, wealth in the midst of a mass, poverty. I think that may be a summation of the challenges that we face in Nigeria. And while looking at the trajectory of the history of Nigeria, yes, growing up in my town, Osogbo, when I was in primary and secondary school, if I get home, I don't even have to go to the kitchen or the room to get water. I'll just put on the tap, and you will see the chlorine still smelling from the water.
God bless
or something
you.
like that. So, and of course, you will also know that I, for instance, attended all my education is public education. I attended public primary school, secondary school, public, university up to my PhD, level. And of course, the costs, and I will say, I will respect the quality is also at par with whatever you can get anywhere in the country. The trying to see where we get air will also necessitate for us to also make quantification on where we must be and what we need to do. First and foremost, I think the absence of responsible governance under military rule contributed a lot into the rot that has happened. As Professor Sadolo said, from January 15, 1936, effectively till 1979 October, and from December 1985, 83 till 1989. At 1999, we don't really have responsive and responsible governance under military in Nigeria. Most of the time, and those are the area, when you look at that period of time to be chronological, 1966 to 1979, that's 30 years. Then 1983 up to 1999, that's another, another about 13 years again. So we are saying that even in the annal of development history of this country, we have had our government under irresponsive and irresponsible governance for almost half of the 2 years we talk about. And when I say this, I was a student during military era, both the Babangida, the later and the Abacha era. What do we have? Military administrators are posted like dictators into communities. There were no input into governance. And some of the and those also coincided with the area when we begin to have population expansion. So facilities that were put in place during the pre-independence and immediately post-independence were being strained, and nothing was being done to be able to do so. I was in the government in Osun between 2010 and 2018. What did we discover? To put back the water reticulation system that had been left abandoned since the 70s in Osun will take almost the resources of the state for the next 50 years to be able to fix, because on an incremental basis these were left to be done. So when you don't expand your water reticulation system to meet the demand of population increase as things were going on, then when you look at until recently when Buhari administration came and trying to get back on the rail system, my mother as a trader used to send egg from Osogbo to Zaria, Zamaru to sell, and they will come back during rail system. But the rail system was also left unattended to during this period of military interregnum. The same thing with the power sector. Power sector became cesspool of corruption and lack of accountability, such that even the costs that were being recovered were not plowed back to be able to expand the capacity of those infrastructure. Then that was about the effect of military lack of accountability into government. Then when we now settle down to democratic governance in 1999, we must tell ourselves that because we have been ingrained in terms of political sociology of even being able to have accountable governance, even democratically elected leaders also, while parodying government principles, democratic principles, did not also see accountability as part of what is necessary. And of course, what is supposed to be the most vibrant arm of government to drive development is the legislative arm. Unfortunately, they were also victim of executive high-handedness on the executive arm when we are seated to democracy. You discover that the first term of 1999 2003, I think about 4 or 5 leadership change occur at the Senate, and that's because the executive I believe that they must, kowtow to that. Of course, when, as a matter of survival, the subsequent National Assembly felt that, okay, the best way to insulate themselves is to play along even when things were gone wrong. And then we have not been able to assess the constitution that was left to us by military. When the military, there was a poet, an Arabic poet, that says, when water, when anything is get dirty, you use water to clean it. But when water itself is dirty, what do you use to clean it? The legacy of the military dictatorship, which is the constitution that we are using, as democratically elected people, and I'm not also insulating myself, we have not had the courage to look at this constitution. To what extent can that constitution generate meaningful governance that will catalyze in development? And I will exemplify by the fact that today we are left from 1996 with 36 state structure, except, for instance, Lagos or Port Harcourt or River State. I don't see any of these states capable of being said to be proper federated units, because they rely largely on the handout from the federal allocation to be able to even pay salaries and allowances of their workers. And when you look at the budget of our states, most of the budgets, more than 75% of them, goes to recurrent expenditure. You cannot have development even in those states being able to do so. Then when you look at the so-called revenue allocation formula, 52% goes to the national government, the federal government. So no state in Nigeria, even in that of allocation, gets up to 1% from the federal allocation. Then what is the capacity? What is the nature of economic development that is going on in those states for them to be able to generate revenue, to be able to run their government? So one, going forward, we must first address the structure of government in Nigeria. We must be able to look at it that, do we want to have government for the purpose of politics and government's sake, or purpose of government for the purpose of delivering on infrastructure, delivering on the welfare of the people and advancement of our people economically in terms of progress? How do I mean? You have even a national budget. As I speak today, only 4.1 trillion is devoted to capital aspect of our budget. The bulk of that, 5.8 trillion, another 3.4 trillion goes to non-debt recurrent expenditure and debt recurrent expenditure. How do you catalyze development? Then when you also look at the allocation going to the state, the bulk of those allocation goes to service the bureaucracy of government. The people want to mention Samadu Bello and Azikiwe and Obafemi Awolowo. When Chief Awolowo was at the premier of the Western region, up to Ikare Akoko, up to Okakoko, up to Ekpe, only one bureaucracy serving the entire Western region. The same geographical space now has about 7 or 8 bureaucracies, state assembly, civil service bureaucracy, governors servicing the same geographical space with humongous expenses going to payment of salaries and allowances. How do we catalyze development in that regard? And in terms of economic development, we have tied ourselves to what I call a kind of atavistic disposition, to that this is how things were done. We should not be able to do things differently. Yes, the idea of a national grid was beautiful when the nature of economic activities and spread and requirement of power will be able to sustain so. But when you load everything, and that every electricity generated must go to a national grid, and the transmission system that was built possibly when Nigerian population was possibly 45 or 50 million Nigerians to service 180 million Nigerians. So we need to also address the issue of power. And as a member of National Assembly, I've had cause to challenge our leadership that all this power sector agreement we had, they said it cannot be looked at. I don't believe so. I'm a legal practitioner. Let us look at all these power sector agreement. If you have to pay penalties, it's better we pay that penalties now. Let us reset the power sector. You cannot develop industrially without power. Even to do a barber, to do hairdressing salon, you must have generator, and you must be able to spend a lot of money servicing that sector too. So we need to address issue of power. then we need to look at even, the structure of our federal, government. We respect the demand. I've worked at the state level before. The demand of Nigerians on governance rests squarely as to what happened at the local, level. Our local government system administration has gone. And when you talk of problem of insecurity, it's largely because there's no presence of governance at that level again. Then at the state level, because of the excessive bureaucracy and because of their handicap by resources, they're unable to deliver on what they're supposed to do. And that's why you see some of us as national legislators, you have pressure for us to even do roads. You have pressure on us to provide water, pressure on us to provide maternity center, which ideally are supposed to be responsibility of governance at the local and at the state level. So we need to rethink. It's not about criticizing unduly, but we need to take a step back, look at what is the feeling and plight of the generality of Nigeria. If utilitarianism is anything to go back, that governance should be about the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. We need to think back and then take ourselves out of our comfort zone, confront these challenges, and ensure we recalibrate Nigeria in a way that generates development, that address issue of poverty and mass unemployment of our teeming youths, which is a critical factor. What we have realized is that governance bureaucracy, because it has become excessive, cannot even accommodate in terms of saying civil service bureaucracy. In the 70s and some earlier part of the 80s, before the structural adjustment program, when you graduate, if you can't find job, at least they will take you to public service. Public service cannot even accommodate you. Then when you go to public service, because of the pension reform that we have done, the joy of public service is that when you retire, you have something to fall back upon. The retirement savings account may be nothing after you have spent 30, 40 years in that place. So the only way, the safety valve for our teeming youth is to industrialize, to expand capacity of our economy so that they can be gainfully employed. If care is not taken, we are sitting on a keg of gunpowder. If the teeming unemployed youth of Nigerians are not gainfully employed and be employed and be able to see a source of livelihood. And I say it as it is, not minding the fact that I hold a public office, I'm a member of the ruling party, but we must be concerned that whatever we do today, there will be a reference that whether we speak out as to what energize development, what energize dealing with the challenges of poverty, squalor and hopelessness of the teeming Nigerian people, particularly the youth.
You've raised a lot of pertinent questions here, Kingsley, hasn't he?
Certainly.
Let's bring in Professor Osadolo. Now, you've listened to them in the studio. I think what they're trying to say is we need a total reorientation of the Nigerian system itself so that we can form a national identity. But still, as a professor of history, like Kingsley said earlier, the generation behind us, 30, 35, do not even know how good Nigeria was. I had a tip of it before it started going bad, but let's have your opinion on how we can reorient the way Nigerians think, and because we operate one of the most expensive governments in the world today, and how can we place ourselves in the Committee of Nations and be able to have a voice that can be heard internationally?
Thank you so much. I think the first step we should take is very clear. Look at what members of the National Assembly they are collecting every month. The Senate and the House of Reps. And also look at what is classified as constituency funds to finance projects in their constituencies, which are never done. Now, put those resources away from the National Assembly and invest it in the economy, and you will see a great boom. Are they willing to make that sacrifice? As a professor, I don't earn up to 500,000, but I'm happy. Not because of what I earn, but because of my passion to contribute to national development. I repeat, take the National Assembly. Look at the resources invested in that assembly. It doesn't make sense that politics is all about what you invest and the millions you make from it. That is the first reorientation about our society. That will lead us to what we describe simply as resource mobilization. Look, let us not make any mistake. Nigeria has resources. And these resources were invested in the building of Delta Steel Complex, Alaja, near Warri, Ajakuta Steel, Castellan Steel Rolling, some other major structures that were built. All of a sudden, they all collapsed. What has happened to the resources that were invested in those projects? Look at the first 8 years of the Fourth Republic in Nigeria. Most government structures, they were sold. The ones that were built with millions were sold in thousands. The ones that were built with billions were sold with pennies. What happened? Today, they are not functioning. So we cannot begin to say we want reorientation without reevaluating our own personal interests. This country, the pursuit of wealth, money, has become a major challenge to the extent that even the unborn child is not even talking about how to develop himself or herself and get the merits for a particular job, but how to make money within the shortest possible time. We have now begun in this country. We are now worshiping money in Nigeria. Christians, they have abandoned God. They are worshiping money. Muslims, they have abandoned Allah. They are worshiping money. Those traditional people, they have abandoned their gods and worshiping money. The worship is money has created and complicated problems in this country. That is the beginning of our reorientation. And it must begin with politicians. Campaign kicked off yesterday. Go to the banks, you can't find dollars anymore because I'm told, or we are told, or we understand that all the monies are made for campaigns. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that? Nigeria should be concerned about issues-based campaign. What exactly do you want? The problems of politics, we have identified the problems. How do you solve these problems? What do you want to do when it comes to government? That is the problem that we should be addressing in this country. Not buying your way to power. Yes, you get power. That is legitimacy to do whatever you want to do. But in the end, how does it benefit us? Same on reorientation. How do we evolve public-spirited leadership? It's a critical aspect of nation building. How do we understand that a leadership is responsible, a leadership has integrity, a leadership is transparent, a leadership is accountable? All of this put together will bring a reorientation about how we want to rebuild Nigeria in the next years. We are looking forward to Nigeria at 100, the centenary of independence. We are 62. Many people will get there today, others will not get there. But those that will get there, what will be their plans from today? By next year, there will be a change of regime. What will be the orientation of the new government that will come into power on the 29th of May, 2023, after the elections of February and March? What is their thinking about this country? What is their thinking about the people? What is their thinking about development? Thinking about Nigeria's status among the other nations of the world. That is my major concern. But beyond all of this, let us come back home. Resource mobilization.
All right, Professor Sadolo, thank you very much there for your perspective. We have, of course, many more issues to deal with, but we have to go on a short break now.
Finally, the hero of Nigeria's democracy has arrived. He shall usher us into a new phase of development, peace, and prosperity. He is the father of the new Nigeria, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR. Welcome to another season of giving Nigerians hope yet again. We are sure of a great future for both ourselves and generations yet unborn. We look forward to your leading us as a nation to our manifest destiny. Though the challenges against us as a people are many, we know that your leadership shall set us on the right path to our greatness. A new dawn beckons on us all, and having you as our president is a precursor to this. Thank you for believing in Nigeria. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
We've been trying our best to contain the situation, and in our operations we've been able to make a lot of recoveries. We've been able to also arrest suspects that are involved in this kind of activities, and we've been able to also recover particularly arms and ammunition from those who are carrying it unlawfully and disturbing the peace of the people. But generally, our morale in the Nigerian police is always guided by our commitment to do what we have sworn to do. Peace and security must be looked into as a priority by all, to look at security as the business of all of us.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Everywhere you go, from banks to hospitals to public offices, mass transit stations, airports, and even telecommunication centers, senior citizens are treated as nuisances. They are not. They are senior members of our society, and they deserve the utmost respect. We shouldn't be having our aged fathers and mothers standing in long queues to withdraw their monies at banks. Our retired senior citizens shouldn't be caught standing in buses for lack of seats or chasing after one just to get to their destination. Senior citizens shouldn't have to sit long hours in hospital corridors with no geriatric specialist to attend to them. Our senior citizens deserve better treatment from all of us. They deserve to be listened to. They are deserving of seat reservations on public buses and priority attendance in public spaces. As young people, we are quick to say, no one owes you. This is not true. We owe the elderly members of our society a helping hand, our services, and respect. Age-friendly societies have more senior citizens enjoying good health, living safely, and engaging in meaningful community work than those who do not. Simplifying age-friendly services for senior citizens.
The counsel of our fathers.
I will urge and advise our younger generation to use talent and brain to sort out problems, not arms.
Nigerian youth, let's build our nation together.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Gentlemen, there's an issue I would like us to address. I know we've touched on the developmental challenges, the developmental dream, and how to reset it. But there was also the issue of integration, and many persons would argue that the drawback we have on development flows from the challenges on the integrative side. I would like you gentlemen to take on this, but let me ask the historian in our midst, Professor Osadolo from our Benin Network Center. Today we can look at Italy and say, oh, Italy is a leading economic power in the world. But Italy was never a country. Italy was an amalgam of many nations until it was put together by Garibaldi, I believe. Germany, where of course you lived and also went to school. Germany was never a country. I'm not talking about East and West Germany now. I'm talking about, what Germany of old, as it was known. It took Bismarck to forge it together. But so if these disparate, as it were, entities could be brought together, and today they are what they are, what is it that the leadership over time has done right that we could also learn from? I'm just using the examples of Germany and Italy.
Yes, thank you so much. Italy was united in 1870, followed by German unification in 1871. There's something that is common to both Germany and Italy. That has to do with their national outlook. We also need in Nigeria today to build a national outlook. Let us not see ourselves, oh, I'm Yoruba, I'm Igbo, I'm Hausa, I'm Fulani, I'm Ibibio, I'm this and that. Let us see ourselves first and foremost as Nigerians. That was what the Germans did. That was what the Italians did. They created the opportunity for a national outlook. That outlook itself now gave them a national identity. We are Germans, we are Italians. From that identity, now they began to have their aspirations in building a new nation, just as we can also do here in Nigeria. Now, once you have that drive of national aspiration, it creates a consciousness that you are a Nigerian, you are building your country for everybody. You can live in any part of the country as a resident and contribute your best towards the development of your country from wherever you are located. Beyond all of this, of course, is the fact that most Nigerians today, they are easily divided by ethnicity and by religion. Let us reassess. See, Nigeria as a society has a people with different origins, different histories, different languages, different religions, and of course, different cultures. How do we harness all of this to integrate them into a great nation that is called Nigeria? We lost it at the point when we said, oh, don't teach history in schools anymore. History is the only basis in which we can create in our citizens that kind of consciousness to understand the past, to understand our present, and of course, to look at the future. We have always emphasized politics in Nigeria, struggle for power. Everybody, every group have their own concept of power. They are struggling, they are fighting. This is what we want to do with power. This is how we want to grab power. That does not make for integration. The Germans don't do that. The Italians, you refer to, don't do that. But they understand that power is for the purpose of development. They work within that concept in terms of their national interest. We must, as Nigerians, in the interest of this nation, begin to look for forces of integration, how to build them using history as the basis for which we can erect pillars on the integrative forces that make Nigeria one. I strongly believe in one Nigeria. I strongly believe that Nigeria as one will remain as one. In the future, nations of the world will become envious of us if we are able to integrate all of these forces to forge ahead in building a nation that will be the jealousy of the rest of the world.
Thank you very much, Prof. Dr. Omar Bridge, I would like you to also weigh in here, because it was talking about creating the national identity, and some persons will cite the very recent history of Rwanda. After the genocide of 1994, the Tutsis and the Hutus, they have outlawed ethnic identities. In the past, if you had an ID card, you had to state your tribe, X, Y, Z. Now you are simply Rwandese. And many would argue the narrative of Rwanda is changing. So how do we harness those integrative forces that would then provide, as it were, a base for us to catapult ourselves to be the very best in the world?
Thank you very much. I think if I were to very, very briefly put your previous question on where did we go off the rail from before, when we all went to school, local schools that had games masters, that had messengers, that had headmasters and so on, to now something else, plus this integration. You see, excellent submission by a professor that we shouldn't actually knock off history from the courses to avoid leaving children not to know what has happened. This integration, we were there. Nation building is a process. It's level 1, level 2, level 3, and you build it up. All these complaints that you hear from people, or National Assembly people, or assembly people in the state consuming money, is an indication that we are not good in creating wealth. And you cannot create wealth if you do not have the capacity and capability to create wealth. Then if you have the dormant wealth and you are only sharing it, you are only draining the pipe. If you are creating wealth, you will not even know that you are paying people too high, And how do you create wealth? You need the capacity, capability, and institutional maturity. Joining it with integration in those days, in the 60s, 70s, even up to 80s when we went to university, when you go to a Nigerian federal university, you go to a cosmopolitan system. You meet Yorubas there. I schooled in Maiduguri. There were Kegites in Maiduguri University. There were all these cultural things happening, and you enjoy it. You are a young person. In my class, I was the only person from Yola. And I had, Basis and whoever, they were my friends. But then, like Kingsley said, how did Maiduguri University become totally a Northeast university? How did University of Ibadan, that produced Professor Jibril Amin then, Abubakar them, and all the others, there was no Yorubaness or whatever. It was a Nigerian university, highly ranked because of the cosmopolitan. Today, University of Ibadan, 98% of their teachers and students put together are Yorubanized. Go to Nsukka, it is an Igbo university. Now, how do you expect young people within the ages of 20 to 30 go to a university, say Ibadan? They have been eating amala and shaki in the house. In the universities, amala and shaki. They're speaking Yoruba, they're wearing the same dress. And you expect them to behave Nigerian when they become 40. It's not, they don't even know. So actually, if this is where the integration is, when you capture your 20, 30-year-olds and you build them up as a cosmopolitan system within universities and polytechnics, so that the chap who is from Nsukka has technical capability in terms of looking at things, is studying in Sokoto, where he sees red goats, and he says, if the course I'm going to do chemical engineering. See, well, because that is culturally how he thinks. And then after graduation, he stays there. Before you know, you have a leather industry in Sokoto that is actually exporting. The chap who is now from Maiduguri has schooled in Benin and has seen the opportunities of palm oil. He's done chemical engineering. He knows, he's thinking soap and so on and so forth. This integration of these young people in these institutions is key. If I were the president, to be quite honest with you, appointing vice chancellors today is about which Oba do you know, which emir do you know, which senator do you know. It has to be on a vice chancellor who will get on his bike from Maiduguri to go to Benin and get the first classes, to go to Lagos and get the first, and create that cosmopolitan studentship so that they are taught properly. They are working together. They don't see their differences in terms of tribe. They see their differences in the type of argument, technically. And that is when they is going to unleash Nigeria's opportunities when they graduate. So I think the integration has to be very, very strategic. It has to be planned, and it is not going to rain from the sky. We must evolve it, and we must evolve it properly.
Indeed, and Senator Salajuddin, while I was doing my research yesterday, I came across something the first Prime Minister of Nigeria, Tafawa Balewa, on his visit to the Americas. In that time, he said, and I quote, "In less than 200 years, this great country was welded together by people of so many different backgrounds. They built a mighty nation and have forgotten where they come from and who their ancestors were. They have pride in only one thing, the American citizenship." Where is our pride in Nigeria?
I think we must make a separation between the consciousness and the manipulation of the elite and the consciousness and spirit of togetherness of the mass of the Nigerian people. Most of the problem I earlier referred to in my first comment on absence of a Nigerianized perspective and culture. They are more of elitist a manipulation because of the political economy of what I call access to power and resources in the country. the architect and the build of the Nigerian, society is predicated on access to power. And each of the elites of the different ethnic nationality comprising of Nigeria, and of course, take the issue of manipulation to the level of access to power. So we begin to say that yes, it is time for Yoruba, it is time for the Igbo, it's time for that, not really to even serve the interests of the majority of the Yoruba people or Hausa people or Nupe people, but to be able to corner part of the rental economy that we operate in Nigeria. So we must also know that on the lower rung of a society, an average Yoruba or Hausa or Nupe does not see themselves in the light that elite try to manipulate those ethnic consciousness only for the purpose of access to the resources of the state we are doing. So
Senator, Senator, I'm sorry to disturb you. I'm sorry to interrupt. Your argument is sound. Now, the ordinary Nigerians don't mind those things. The elite manipulate those levers. But when the elite do manipulate those levers, the ordinary Nigerians turn one against another and slaughter themselves and each other. How do we?
Let me put it further.
Yes.
But because those elites, what they do is that because they have no consensus about Nigerianization, only to the extent of being able to fight for those things, they also now enlist behind themselves the masses of those places and try to use so many factors, information, or whatever resources that they have to be able to do so. But in reality, what we need to do to forge an integrated perspective of Nigeria is for us to begin to have elite consensus on the fact that we want to develop, and that in the context of a larger development, everybody's interest will be taken care of, and you don't need to create divisiveness for you to be able to access to power. And just as been said, I take something from what Dr. Jibril has said, to even be vice chancellor or rector of a polytechnic, the question of the person must be an indigene of that particular place.
Well, come from the village.
That's a particular one that is going on at the Federal Polytechnic in Kwara State, where somebody from my town, for instance, has the requisite qualification, and it's been said that because somebody else come from that particular town and is already even past the age of, then they must be there. Then if we want to talk of University of Ife, somebody saying that somebody who must be OAU vice chancellor must be an indigene of Ife. Somebody who must be vice chancellor University of Ife must be somebody from my. See, these are part of what it is, more of the elite positioning, using primordial sentiment and nepotist agenda to further their own interest. And unfortunately, because in the kind of society that we have, our masses are still largely disempowered in terms of education, in terms of access to independent economic survivor. They are still tied to the apron string of the elite who use this to be able to manipulate that process. In fact, what we'll have is weaponization of ethnic identity, weaponization of religion, in order to be able to advance the interest of the elite. So for us as elites, the danger is this, and that is why we must first have an understanding that we only make progress, development together, when we identify with the oneness and unity of Nigeria. And in the context of a well-developed Nigeria, everybody will have access to whatever will require them to live a meaningful life, not at the expense of the generality of the people.
Senator Basiru, thank you very much. Senator Dr. Umar Bindri, you are claiming it, but it will not be 2023. It will be subsequent. All right. Let's also, for the benefit of some of our viewers, it is not as if past Nigerian leaders in the post-independence period did not recognize the need for integration. For instance, we're talking about the villagization of our institutions, whether tertiary or otherwise. And yet, we had the expansion of the federal unity schools. which was the purpose of saying, look, let's get integrated from all over. In 1973, the General Gowon regime introduced the National Youth Service Corps, by which, I mean, you went out from your state. As young men, fresh graduates, we were happy to serve hundreds of kilometers away from home because it was the first time you were getting exposure to that part of the country.
But now they want to go back home and serve.
That is to say, look, where did we lose it? Where did we lose it? Some of these integrative ideas, everything appears to be, again, as Basiru said, what is wrong with the Nigerian elite class? Let me ask you that question.
I think very briefly, there are many, many things. I mean, you can spend the whole of the 2023 discussing about these issues and you will not exhaust it. But the target actually is that Nigerian leaders have always demonstrated, whether on the surface or deep down, that we want to develop. Historically, you remember Green Revolution, Operation Feed the Nation, indigenization policy, even down to the Obasanjo time, Vision 2020, even Abacha said Vision 2010. We had transformation agenda. These are all zeals to demonstrate that we want this country to change and develop. Then your question is how? Why are we losing all this? I can tell you for sure that today, if you go to either the Federal Secretariat or any government or whatever, try to look for the report on why have we not achieved the Vision 2010. You will not get that report. We just jumped onto 2020. Then now 2020 has passed. Where is the document that says, well, this is the reason why we have failed in 2020. We want to correct that to again 2030. You know, to a certain extent, the present administration said, hey, there are 3 levels that we recognize. First, you have to conquer poverty. Once you are drinking clean water, your children can go to school and you can get a job when you graduate, I think people will calm down. If after this, then you need to give young people skills. Why, for God's sake, that every single time, state government, local government, or federal government, when we construct roads and we are commissioning it, you will see foreigners behind the leaders who have done it. We are just cutting tapes and clapping. Where is the universities working? Where are our engineers? Where are our medical doctors? This question has to be asked. And then if we realize this, in my submission, final submission is that I think our education system, particularly the tertiary education system, where young people who are getting energetic to enter management are all pulled in one place, we have to enter there. We have to enter there with our very best. We have to make sure that all of them have access to internet. They have come from all over the country. They see the opportunities in our country. And hopefully, we will create people who are thinking positively. We will create potential entrepreneurs. We can create people who are progressively, politically. And then as they go out, they will now see the opportunities in our country, whether it is the water, or the cows, or the milk, or whatever. And gradually, I think if that is happening, we will be gradually developing institutions that can take us to the next level. But if we use politics to chop what is already, what I call, don't shake a boat that is already broken, it will shatter. It will shatter. So, young people, don't listen to leaders negatively. Try to be positive because you have another 6 years to go. Gain skills and take the advantages in our country positively.
And then in gaining skill, I might add, as one of the anchors for today's program, our young persons should no longer be misled by the so-called skill acquisition centers that do not offer real, genuine skills that can catalyze development in our country. Basiru, you agree?
I agree with you.
Bindri, you agree?
I agree totally.
Thank you.
Professor Osadolo, do you agree? Let's have your final thoughts in 30 seconds, please.
We need to imbibe in our youth the spirit of being creative, innovative, and hardworking. And that will make a difference in the future.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Osadolo. He's the Professor of History and International Studies from the University of Benin, and also the immediate past acting Vice Chancellor of Ambrose Ali University, Ekpoma, Edo State. Thank you so much for coming on Good Morning Nigeria. We also thank Engineer Dr. Umar Bindir, his National Coordinator, National Social Investment Program, NSIP, Office of the Honorable Minister, Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
And Senator Surajuddin Ajibola Basiru, thank you so much for coming. Well, sports update is next.
I doubt if we can take sports, Juma.
Time has
Yeah,
run out,
yes, we're out of time. So remember, once again, this is the first in our series on the independence anniversary. Nigeria is 62. Of course, there will be a celebration on Saturday. Tomorrow, we're back with another theme. Join us same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Look after yourselves. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And Monday is a public holiday for 9 to 5 workers. Well, we will still be here to bring you and discuss on issues that are, happening across the country. Thank you so much for watching. I am Jummai Yusuf.